selection with it. You basically just had to take what was there. But the bud viability was good, well above 80%. The remove the spur above the basal node treatment was an absolute dream. As you can imagine, it was nice and open canopy. Basically just walked through. The wood was good quality. The spurs were strong and thick, healthy, excellent bud viability, and the positioning, basically you had a beautiful selection of spurs that you could prune back and have a nice open canopy. So the conclusions from this trial, after a severe frost, basically the conclusions we came to was to consider doing nothing. Wait and see, have a look at what your secondary shoots are doing. Have a look at what your secondary shoot fruitfulness is like. Your secondary shoot fruitfulness is never going to be as much as your primary shoots, but you will get some crop. Between 50 and 70% in most cases, secondary shoot fruitfulness. Particularly if once you start getting that shoots through, that you manage that, you will get some return off it. Now, that's a severe crop when all your shoots get frosted right back. In a lighter frost, in some respects a lighter frost is going to be a little bit more complicated for you to manage. And that's because quite often in a lighter frost you'll end up with some primary shoots and primary bunches remaining and some secondary shoots, so you get that dual ripening on your vines. So with a lighter frost you might need to think about pruning to even up your growth. So you might want to either go across, have a look at how many primary bunches you've got left. If there's just a few primary bunches, you might want to remove those and allow the secondaries to come through and manage the secondary crop as one crop. Or if you've got a lot of primaries through, you may need to go through at a later date and remove the secondary bunches so that you don't get that uneven ripening within your crop. You need to watch for damage inflorescences. A small amount of damage on your inflorescence is a site for botrytis rot. So with a lighter frost, there's a lot more monitoring that needs to go on. You need to go through, and there may be a lot more work for you for pruning. This year we set up some cultivar response work. So we were looking at Chardonnay and Shiraz, and I did this work up at Plunkett's in the Strathbogie Ranges, and the reason we did it up there is because we basically wanted to set up a frost manipulation trial or a frosting trial that wasn't frosted. With this trial, what we did is we had Chardonnay and Shiraz, and what I did is I implemented frost onto them, and by implemented what I did is actually just cut the vines back to the frosting levels, to a light frost to a heavy frost. So a light frost was cutting the shoots back around the same time as we got frosted in 2006, so in October, mid-October. I went through, and for a light frost we cut the shoots back to about the 4 or 5 node length. So usually leaving maybe one primary bunch, sometimes none, sometimes 2. For a heavier frost we cut them right back to 1 or 2 nodes to simulate that heavy frost, and then I had a control where no frost occurred. The reason we did it up at Strathbogie is because if I had a natural frost come through after I implemented the trial, it would have just completely wiped it out. So what I'm looking for within this trial was secondary growth. So we wanted to see what the secondary shoot fruitfulness was like with the Shiraz and the Chardonnay in a controlled environment, and also their recovery. And what we've done so far is I've got the yields, the quality parameters, so bricks, TA, and we've also done a whole heap of canopy measurements, so structural canopy measurements to look at what their growth is like, so whether we're getting lateral shoots, whether we get auxiliary shoots. And basically this work's in progress, so I haven't got any results to show you until maybe the end of the year. So further study, in my mind the areas that are definitely lacking are critical temperatures for Australian cultivars, and for different, not just the critical temperature, but the critical temperatures at the different stages of growth. So critical temperatures for bud swell and the woolly bud stage, critical temperature for first leaf, second leaf, third leaf. And I think that information is definitely lacking within the literature, and something that we really need to look at. The cultivar tolerance and susceptibility, the stuff that we're doing at Plunkett's is a little bit of that, but I think it needs to be done a bit more. Cab Sav, Riesling, Pinot Noir, anything that's within Australia, to look at the susceptibility to frost, which is partially the critical temperatures. So what temperatures do they freeze at? What's their recoverability like from frost? We're currently doing, with Tom at the moment, we're exploring some different management in conjunction with the ice nucleating bacteria study, and this is something I think we need to continue on with. And the reason for that, well, Tom will explain that a little bit further, but to be able to manage the vines in respect to the biology of the vines. And lastly, something that I'd really like to get done is maybe set up some management guidelines or some management notes for post-frost management. Now, Mike's done the work with Stan Howell on the practical considerations for protecting your vines against frost. I'd like to actually do something for after being frosted, so that you've got something to refer to. Once you get frosted, you've got a booklet or some guidelines that you can go and refer to for your cultivars, your Australian cultivars, in your environment, and possibly what you need to do. So just as acknowledgement, GWRDC for the funding for this, Xavier at Coombe Farm for setting up the trials in 2006, Rachel and Tim at Foster's at St Hubert's for setting up their trial 2006, Kieran, the viticulture research team at Melbourne Uni, and my supervisors, which is Snow Barlow, Mike and Greg. A little bit of a take-home message. The management you impose after a frost will depend on the timing of the frost. So if you get a frost earlier in the year, straight after bud burst, your vines are more likely to recover than if you get them further on in the year. The severity of your frost. In some respects, a severe frost may actually be easier to manage than a lighter frost. And what's economically viable for your situation. So if you can afford to implement treatments, if you can afford to wait, if you have got enough crop that you can actually then continue on with it and keep spraying and keep your management practices up, and you get enough crop to give you a profit for the year, go ahead with it. If you're not going to make a profit off it, there's not much point really. And the other thing I think that you all really need to think about is when you do get a frost, particularly severe frost, don't panic initially. Wait and just see. Watch your vines. Watch what your secondary growth's doing. And yeah, don't panic basically. And that's it.
Well done, Sonja.
Yeah, true.